As a hockey fan, one of my favorite things to talk about and make videos on are trades, trade rumors, trade speculation, all that good stuff. This is a video that I've made during the playoffs in each of the past few years before the offseason begins, so I'm going to do it again this year, go over some NHL stars, some big name players that I feel like we could see traded over the summer. Tonight is also the NHL draft lottery where somebody's franchise is going to change in a big way. If you're a fan of one of the teams that are eligible to get that first overall draft pick, one of the bottom 11 teams in the league, then leave a like on this video for some good luck. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with a really obvious one, Pierre-Luc Dubois of the Winnipeg Jets. I almost wanted to say of the Montreal Canadiens already, but that hasn't happened yet. Bottom line is, pretty much everybody knows that that is where Pierre-Luc Dubois wants to be. Montreal is where he wants to play. In late March on 32 Thoughts, Elliotte Friedman said the Jets have talked to the Canadiens on and off about Dubois. We know that Dubois is going to end up there 95%. Is there some way we can make a deal so the Canadiens get him earlier and we get something we want? Pierre-Luc Dubois is coming off of a pretty strong regular season. He set a new career high with 63 points in 73 games. Despite that, a lot of Jets fans have kind of a sour taste in their mouth when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois because of his performance in Game 5 of their first round matchup against the Vegas Golden Knights, where he was kind of out there just skating around, did not look engaged whatsoever. A lot of people compared that performance in Game 5 to his performance in his last game as a Columbus Blue Jacket before he was traded to the Winnipeg Jets for Patrick Laine. I'm sure you all remember that infamous shift where Pierre-Luc Dubois literally looked like he was just out there for a public skate on a Sunday. Dubois' current contract status, he is a restricted free agent, so he can't just go and sign with the Montreal Canadiens if he pleases. Now, of course, Montreal could offer sheet Pierre-Luc Dubois, but given how much leverage they have in this situation, I don't think that makes much sense for them to do. If the Winnipeg Jets want something in return for Dubois when he inevitably leaves for Montreal, I think it makes most sense to move him this offseason after he just put up a career high in points, because if the Winnipeg Jets decide to hold on to Dubois and not trade him to Montreal, then Dubois can just accept his one-year qualifying offer and walk him straight to unrestricted free agency next offseason, where then he would be able to sign wherever he likes, which would likely be in Montreal, of course. The one thing that really sucks here for the Jets and their fan base is if they do decide to trade Pierre-Luc Dubois, the return is most likely going to be pretty underwhelming because, like I mentioned, Montreal has all the leverage in this situation. If Winnipeg is asking for too much, Montreal can just say, that's fine, we're just going to wait for him to hit unrestricted free agency and sign him then for nothing. If you guys have any mock trade ideas, though, for a Dubois trade to Montreal that you think could happen this offseason, I'm interested to see what those are, so leave them down below in the comments. Moving along now to the next player, I have Alexis Lafreniere, former first overall draft pick by the New York Rangers in 2020, and for Laf, I am definitely using the term star player loosely. If you go by his on-ice performance, obviously not a star caliber player just yet, but I feel like he does have star power. He's a big name player for sure, so that is why I decided to include him on this list. Obviously, throughout his first 3 NHL seasons, he hasn't been that game-breaking dynamic talent that everybody expected him to be coming out of the 2020 draft. I feel like a lot of the story with Lafreniere so far throughout his career has been a lot of, taking a couple steps forward, but then taking 3 steps back. He'll have, sometimes month-long stretches where he looks really good, he's putting up numbers, and everyone thinks this is finally where he breaks out, but then there'll be long stretches where he goes back to being a little bit of a non-factor, and the most recent example of that was actually in the first round against the New Jersey Devils. Lafreniere was pointless through 7 games. Now, that being said, Lafreniere is still just 21 years of age. I'm not writing him off, I'm not calling him a bust by any means, but I do kind of get the feeling that maybe the Rangers could be getting a little bit impatient with his development. After the Rangers were bounced in the first round by the New Jersey Devils, there was a report saying that one of Kakko or Lafreniere could wind up being a cap casualty for the New York Rangers this offseason. Guys like Keandre Miller and Alexis Lafreniere are RFAs and in need of new deals. Some notable UFAs, Tyler Mott, Nico Mikkola, and then Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. I'm really interested to see how the Rangers approach the offseason. If they try to bring back one of Kane or Tarasenko, I feel like in a perfect world, you want to bring back at least one of those guys. There is no doubt in my mind, however, though, if the New York Rangers do decide to dangle Alexis Lafreniere around his trade bait, there would be no shortage of teams interested in the 21-year-old, the former first overall draft pick. Moving along now to the next player on my list, we have Norris Trophy finalist and in all likelihood the Norris Trophy winner for 2023, Erik Karlsson, defenseman for the San San Jose Sharks. This season was massive for Erik Karlsson. He went from being probably one of the most untradeable contracts in the league to now, like I said, most likely winning the Norris this year and having one of the most explosive offensive seasons from a defenseman we have seen in recent memory. 25 goals and 101 points. The first defenseman to put up 100 plus points in a season since Brian Leetch did it for the New York Rangers back in the 91-92 season. You put up those kinds of numbers, it doesn't matter what your contract is, there's going to be at least some level of interest, and throughout a better part of the regular season, that was the case, especially leading up to the trade deadline. There was a lot of talk about Erik Karlsson potentially being on the move. One team that was heavily rumored to be in talks with the San Jose Sharks were the Edmonton Oilers, but after they went out and acquired Mattias Ekholm, who has term left on his deal, I feel like that probably takes the Oilers out of the Karlsson sweepstakes. And the reality of the situation was, even though Erik Karlsson was in the midst of having a Norris caliber season, that's still a very difficult contract to move, especially mid-season. If a Karlsson trade is going to happen, I feel like it almost has to happen during the offseason. So that's why I have him on this list. I definitely feel like the Sharks have to do whatever it takes to capitalize on the season that Karlsson just had and move that contract somehow. Don't get too greedy with what you're asking for in return. Just move him somehow because he just doesn't fit the Sharks timeline. Moving along now, I'm being a little bit vague with this one because I'm not choosing one specific player, but man, after watching last night's game 3 between the Maple Leafs and the Panthers, unless the Maple Leafs pull off a miracle and come back and win this series, I feel like 1000% one of their core players is gone this offseason. Sure, they were able to finally get over the hump and win a first round series, but after that, in this series against the Florida Panthers, it feels like the Maple Leafs are just back to being, the same old Maple Leafs that we've seen in the postseason for the last 7 years. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Dom Lucian. He is a prominent member in hockey media, big analytics guy, big Leafs fan, and he tweeted last night, based on the context of this situation, this might be the worst game of Matthews and Marner's career. The Maple Leaf Stars just haven't shown up in this series. 0 goals combined between Nylander, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Riley. That's just not good enough. Obviously, you do have to give credit to the Florida Panthers, who have been very good in this series, very opportunistic. Sergei Bobrovsky has been great, but you need more from your top guys. You need more from your highest paid guys. I really do believe that if Florida ends up finishing off the Maple Leafs in 4 or even in 5, there's a really good chance one of the players that I just mentioned is not on the Maple Leafs next season. Next up on the list, we have JT Miller of the Vancouver Canucks, who just had, I would say, a roller coaster of a regular season. Started off very poorly under Bruce Boudreau. After Boudreau was fired and Taka came in, he did kind of find his game a little bit, still wound up finishing over a point per game with 82 points in 81 games, but the concerns over JT Miller this season were never really about the point production. It was about his play away from the puck, oftentimes being a massive defensive liability, the questions of his leadership on and off the ice. Miller's new contract that will pay him $8 million a season through 2029-30 will kick in next season, and it kind of seems like Vancouver wants to get out from under that contract before it even starts. There was a lot of talk about JT Miller around the trade deadline. Apparently Pittsburgh and Vancouver were heavily engaged in trade talks. Obviously that never ended up happening, but part of me wonders if that could now be pushed to the offseason, if they could pick back up where they left off. And the Canucks are a team that certainly have some cap issues, so I feel like if they see there's an opportunity to get out from under this contract and get something sufficient in return for JT Miller, I think they're going to do it. And now for the final player on my list, the final player we're going to focus on in this video, Elias Lindholm of the Calgary Flames. He's got 1 year left on his contract heading into next season at a cap hit of $4.85 million, which is an absolute bargain for Lindholm. As we know, the Calgary Flames just had a disaster of a regular season when you think about the expectations that everybody had for that team coming into the season, what they were able to do the season prior. And in the Calgary Flames exit interviews, Elias Lindholm was asked on whether he would be open to signing long-term in Calgary, and he was very hesitant in his answer. Any kind of indication from Lindholm that he's not willing to sign long-term, that he wants to test unrestricted free agency, I feel like you absolutely have to trade this player because he's just too valuable to lose for nothing, especially when you consider his cap hit being so low. I feel like the Calgary Flames would be able to get a massive haul for Lindholm if that is what ends up happening, especially if he's traded during the offseason and not at the trade deadline, where the team acquiring Lindholm would have him for a full season as opposed to just the last couple of months of the season and a potential playoff run. You would also be able to try and work out an extension for Lindholm if you had him for the entire season. So I definitely feel like Lindholm is going to be a very interesting name to keep an eye on. And when I mentioned how he kind of hesitated in his answer about whether he'd sign long-term in Calgary in the exit interviews, that was before Calgary moved on from head coach at the time, Daryl Sutter. With him being on the outs, maybe Elias Lindholm is more open to staying in Calgary, who knows, but Lindholm would certainly be a massive trade piece if that's the route Calgary decides to take. So that is going to wrap up this video. Those are some star caliber NHL players that I feel like we could potentially see moved at some point throughout the summer. If you guys think I missed anybody, be sure to let me know those names down below in the comments and why you think they could potentially be traded. Be sure to leave a like on this video if you guys enjoyed, and if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all soon.